Welcome to Life on Purpose. I'm your host, Carolyn K.McGraw, speaker, author, coach, empowering entrepreneurs to maximize their brilliance, to bring their message and make a bigger impact. I'm here today with Michele Mariscal. Welcome, Michele.
Thank you.
So glad to have you. This is a fascinating lady. She's been in the health and wellness industry for 30 years. She has a PhD in molecular and cell biology. She has written several books. She has studied the integrative medicine in shamanism and Reiki and Heartmath. She's a Heartmath trainer. So she's just written her latest. Want to show this?
Sure. Yes. So my latest book is, I'm one of the authors in The Secret Sauce of Downsizing. And my chapter in this book is called Processing Your Emotions. And one of the things about moving is that there can be a lot of emotions that come up. And there may be good emotions that we want to stay with and stay on that high and the excitement of it. And there may be emotions that are trying to be expressed that are of loss. And the point I make in the chapter is it's really important to invite and find ways to express and work with all of our emotions, especially those ones that may come up that we feel like we don't necessarily want to deal with. The chapter is called Processing Your Emotions. And one of the key aspects that I talk about in my chapter is that there are a myriad of emotions that we might experience while we are even leading up to the move and making decisions. In that process, there can be conflicting feelings, actually. And one of the really important things that we want to understand about grief and loss is one of the definitions of grief actually is the conflicting feelings of that occur as a reaction to any change or end of a behavior or just a change in something.
And that's very interesting, Michele, because most people think of a grief as losing someone.
Right.
But there's a grief in change itself, and so many people I know struggle with change. They're resistance, they're unhappy, they don't like change. And so you help people. How do you help people through the grief?
Well, the first thing that we do is the first thing that I do with people is have them recognize and acknowledge that that's even a part of the picture. We've gotten so good in our culture at not feeling what we don't want to feel.
Stuff it down.
Stuff it down in some way. So that's one of the first things I help people do is learn how to become more aware and acknowledge what you are actually feeling. What's about to be buried deep in that body that may come up at any other given time. Or that if we bury it, sometimes that can just add to the stress of what we're trying to get through. So we may come to anger much more easily. So when we are really able to recognize, oh my goodness, I have so many memories in this house. I was a mom. I raised 3 kids in this house. And being able to have a way to acknowledge that and to honor it and to be with those feelings and express that loss is really important.
And letting go of your things.
Well, one of the first things that I teach people when they reach that moment of chaos, when they recognize, again, we've taught them to just pay attention, and when they recognize that, one of the go-to tools I have is from Heartmath, and it's called heart-focused breathing.
Before we get to the heart-focused breathing, because I was really excited when I read that in your chapter, the power of breathing and centering, getting out of our heads and into our hearts. Would you tell us more about what is Heartmath? What is that?
Sure, yeah. So the Institute of Heartmath has been around now for over 20 years, And they have a research center. They started with the research center. They were very interested in looking at the impact of our emotions that we register in our heart and the signaling that goes to the brain. They were very interested to see what is the impact, what's happening there. And so the first thing that they really did substantiate is that there are far more signals going from the heart to the brain than the brain to the rest of the body. I don't know about my audience and you, but certainly through my schooling, it was all about the brain is the king and the queen. And the messaging really started from here. So Heartmath really kind of turned us into looking at a new paradigm that if we're able to recognize that our emotions are actually what's driving much more of what the brain is sending out, that began to help us all understand that we have much more choice. I call it choice. And that's why it's important to be able to recognize the emotions that you're having, because when you get to that place of recognition, it's there that you have a choice to make. Well, one of the most beautiful ones also is called Heart Lock-In. And the really beautiful thing about that is once you get into what we call a coherent state, that's what Heartmath terms the syncing up of the immune system, hormonal system, and nervous system. Once that's all synced up and you're breathing in that pattern, then feeding your body, so radiating to your body and then radiating out. And that can be really helpful in communication. That is one of the best ways to improve communication, is to do that technique and intend to have heartfelt communication. So you radiate that coherent signal outside of yourself.
Coherent signal with the intention of coming from your heart space to have a calmer, peaceful, more productive, effective communication.
Mm-hmm.
To keep the emotions
from,
flaring up.
Yeah, from not being in reaction mode.
Okay, that's huge.
Yeah, because there may be hard things that may need to be spoken of, and when you're in a heart-focused communication, you're able to really state needs without being reactionary about them. So it's a different level of communication. I talk a little bit about that in the chapter as well, communication.
And how you got triggered with your emotions. And what did you do when you went into the conversation with your dad? You were doing something before you spoke. It was just what you're saying.
Right. I I brought myself into that heart space, and I really was drawing in compassion. And when we're breathing compassion and care and those kinds of emotions, those are the signals that are going to the brain.
And that's what I remember you said. You had that feeling of compassion and understanding for him and maybe what he was feeling and going through, which gave you more patience, perhaps, and speaking to him, because I've been through something similar, and I noticed that, I would get angry and I would be triggered, and I didn't know how to calm myself. I didn't know how to step out of that. So really helping people improve their relationships, their communication, and coming from their heart.
Yeah, because one of the things with my dad was my brothers and I were just wanting him to have more company. He was a very charming guy, and he lived in a neighborhood that wasn't so communal, and he really needed community. And so we were having a hard time trying to talk to him about leaving the house, and we didn't really understand why he was so set on staying. And so one weekend I was visiting and just helping him with things, and I went into that heart-centered communication. We finally were able to have that communication where he understood how concerned I was for him and his loneliness and how that was impacting his health. And so he was finally able to share that, he just felt like for us kids, the house was the only legacy, really, that he had to leave for us. And so that just opened everything up, and things began to change. And us, my brothers and I, really didn't care about a legacy. We cared about our dad having a great life, however long he had left. So so we really wanted what was best for him.
So what does it look like for someone that's going through grief and they hire you? Tell us about how that would go, working with someone.
Yeah, sure. So the grief recovery method is now, it's the first evidence-based program for grief recovery. And it is an 8-week program that I take people through in either a group setting or one-on-one. And it has a very particular structure to it. And what we say about the grief recovery method is that it's an educational program with the action steps needed to complete the relationship to the pain that you might be holding over a past loss. It could be a very current loss or one that was 20 years ago. So in 8 weeks, we provide people a toolkit, and it really is a toolkit that they can then utilize as a template for how they discover and loss. Grief and loss oftentimes are about communications that are around hopes, dreams, and expectations that went unmet. And sometimes it has to do with wanting more or wanting things to have been different. So there's a process that allows people to move through and get those communications out.
Okay. So any more tips for people that they can do that are currently going through some grief? You got the breathing, the heart breathing, and the recognizing their emotions. What else would you suggest?
One of the things that I talked about in my chapter that is very helpful, and I did utilize this when I did find that I was overwhelmed and triggered with my dad, and I think is very helpful anytime that we find ourselves in emotions that are hard, and it's to find some way of outwardly expressing it. One of the easiest things to do is to get, if you have crayons around the house or colored pencils, just get those out, get a piece of paper, and just let yourself be guided. Just one time I remember picking up a black pencil and just slashing across the piece of paper. That's an example of a way it might seem like that doesn't do anything. However, there was intention, there was a color, there was and I didn't need to know, what does that mean? I didn't go analyze it. It just allowed me to have a way to get some expression of an emotion that I was feeling. And so colored pencils and allowing, sometimes you can use your non-dominant hand and just ask, what am I really feeling here? And just allow, colors, or just allow that expression to happen. Another effective way is to, if you have any magazines, just flip through the magazine and see if there's an image that has something that you look at and you say, that's how I'm feeling. Like, it's just foggy. Or just some way of relating your emotional, like bringing your inner state and your outer experience together in some way.
So a visual, having a visual
Yes.
can help you focus in and release.
And a lot of times what happens is once we've named it, it shifts. It begins to shift. Something happens in naming it and expressing it. I do a lot of workshops around that kind of work.
So you're meaning like just saying, I am sad, I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling the grief, I'm feeling angry, saying it, stating it, recognizing it, rather than the stuffing and trying to distract that it, and using the breath too, right? Using the breath can just help the process, move it out. Nice. So I do hypnotherapy, and I have had many clients come in with health issues, and that's what they're coming to me for. And what I'm finding is it's really about some grief that they haven't cried the tears, they haven't processed. And once we help them release that grief, their health improves.
I'm on a mission to give permission to cry.
Yes!
You have permission to cry.
Okay, hear that. It's good to cry. And I encourage people when they come to me, because I see some people like, they're afraid to. And I say, let it out, let it go. It's cleansing.
And there's a saying, I don't know who to attribute this to, but there's a saying that crying is washing the windows of the soul. So I always enjoy that one. But the bigger part of it is that sadness is one of the core emotions, and core emotions are meant to be experienced and to flow. And when we don't, and we sideline them with other kinds of emotions that start to show up, like guilt and resentment and things like that, then we're stuffing into the body even more. So really finding ways to just be true to what you may be feeling in the process of downsizing. There can be so many moments where maybe you just have a memory of someone who was there and they are no longer there. They were in that home. Take a moment and acknowledge that. And if it brings up tears, let the tears flow. And then just see how quickly, because you allowed that to flow, but then right behind that comes a sweet memory of a party that you had in the house, or it really is a flow if we let it happen like that. When we have incomplete losses, when we haven't done that work with the action steps and undelivered communications, we may have these incomplete losses. But the way we know we have, we're through that, we can have these feelings of sadness come up, express them, and then those other memories that are more happy, of the sweetness of that life for us, are able to come through.
So this is emotional intelligence that
It really
you're
is
teaching.
Yeah, it really is.
And we're not learning this at school. We're not learning this at home. People aren't teaching us how to deal with our emotions. And if these young kids could learn these tools, that maybe we could cut down on bullying and suicide and anxiety by teaching them tools of breathing and everything that you're saying with this Heartmath.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things too with our kids, we really need to pay attention, because a lot of what we express or don't express about grief is culturally ingrained. And I'll give you a simple example of that, of one of the myths of grief. One of the myths is replace the loss, and it happens so innocently with our kids over something like pet loss. How often do we just say something like, oh, we'll get you another puppy on Saturday, we'll go to the store, whereas to train and teach and mentor and model for our child emotional intelligence, we might consider going into conversation with that child and asking, how are you feeling about this? Letting them express if they are having these feelings of loss over their pet, and maybe finding some way to honor that.
Like scribbling out their feelings maybe, or drawing pictures to represent like the image, finding the image.
Yeah. So much of what parents, and again, not in any, who wants to see their child feeling bad, but one of the things around food addiction, I have found with some people through this grief recovery process, it started very early in their childhood, because that was the way that their feelings of loss were dealt with, like have a cookie. And so it's a learned, that's how I cannot feel. If the child learns, it must be bad to feel this, or I'm not supposed to feel this, let me have a cookie. And so a lot of things can get uncovered when, we become clear about what we're really feeling and express them honestly.
So that's your message. Express your feelings in some way.
Permission to cry.
Yes. Okay. Let's all cry for the good, good, knowing that it's good for our body and our well-being.
Yeah.
To give us that time to cry, and it's okay.
Yeah.
So more about Michele and the secret sauce of downsizing, helping you get through the emotional, the challenge of the overwhelm in downsizing, moving. And you have some other books also.
I do. My first book was actually a children's book, and it's called I'm the Missing Piece. And then I'm in another book called Jumpstart Your Blank, and there's 26 authors in there in my chapter.
I'm in there too.
Oh, you're in there, that's right.
What's your chapter?
My chapter was Jumpstart Your Heart, How to Be a Conscious Co-Creator in Your Day. And
mine is Jumpstart Your Relationship. Better communication and connection, how to forgive and love unconditionally.
And then the Word book, that was just a fun little
I'm in that one
book.
too.
Oh, I didn't know you were in that one. Oh, that's great.
Yeah, be an author, get in the compilation book, and you write a chapter, and you get to say you're an author. So it's a great way to get started in writing your story in your book.
It is. Yeah, and I have to say the book that before The Secret of Downsizing, the one that I published and wrote was called Growing Through Grief, The Alchemy of Healing from Loss. And it really, I used that word alchemy because I found that there really is a grace to surrendering into darkness and just allowing yourself to be there and look around and, deal with being in the darkness. And writing that book actually was my healing out of when my dad did die. My brother very quickly after him also had stage 4 cancer diagnosis and then also passed away. And it was a double whammy, and I was in the darkness. And so writing that book and finding the grief recovery method, that all kind of happened at the same time.
Oh, so through the grief, you found the grief recovery and became the expert, and were able to help so many people.
Yeah, so that has really been the recognition sometimes that the things that are hardest in our life are really opening a pathway to us that we might not have seen.
That is finding your purpose, finding the purpose in these things that happen to us, that there's always some light on the other side. Well, Michele, thank you for sharing all your information, and grief recovery specialist, and her secret sauce of downsizing, and her other, what was your other grief book?
Growing Through Grief.
And where can I find these books?
Those books you can find on my website, www.energym.org.
and they can, how can they go there and find out how to get an appointment with you and your program?
I have lots of information about both these directions and programs I do with Heartmath and with the grief recovery work. And they can also, you can pick up my free copy of an ebook called Growing Through Grief. You can sign up for that and get that on my website. And the lots of goodies for the downsizing book at www.energym.org/downsizing. I have another little video snippet walking you through that heart focused breathing. So if you want to do that again guided, you can go to that, and I also share some more information, some of the science in that short little video clip and some other goodies there. Yeah.
A fascinating, smart lady, has a lot to offer with her talents in helping you improve your health and well-being. How can they find out more about you?
They can go to my website. It is www.energym.org.
All right, and do you have a special offer for our listeners, our viewers?
I do. If you go to energym.org/downsizing, there's a short little webinar if you want to learn more about this Heartmath.